Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So today we are going to be talking about Gucci Q1 as well as Kering overall, but today we're going to focus on Gucci. Maybe I'll do videos on the other brands, but I like to focus on Gucci because so much of Kering's success is determined by what Gucci does. So we'll take a look at the brand, what they did last quarter, and we'll talk about handbags, of course, but we'll also talk about how the brand did overall. So Kering overall for the first quarter was down 14% year on year. They reported 3.88 billion euro in sales, down from 4.5 billion. Wholesale was down. Keep in mind, Kering has been on this decline for some time. For all of 2024, that was a rough year. That was a very difficult year for luxury in general. But Kering has felt it more than a lot of other luxury conglomerates. Gucci as a brand more than other brands. But Kering did face a difficult start to the year. I discussed LVMH recently. They were also a little bit down, but not to this extent. Hermes was up, but missed expectations. Many luxury brands are facing a decline in sales right now. There are multiple reasons, which we've been talking about in other videos, but one major theme that was discussed here was how in most regions, store traffic was down for the group, store traffic was down for Gucci. Regionally, retail sales were down in Asia, 13% in Western Europe and North America, Japan down 11%. Rest of the world was up by 1%. Wholesale was down by 9%. If we want to look more specifically at Gucci retail was down 25% in the first quarter. There was a drop in wholesale sales, 2% increase in royalties and others, but overall down to 1.57 billion. And this is important to focus on when looking at Kering simply because Gucci accounts for roughly half of Kering's revenue and 2/3 of its profits. So again, they stated subdued retail traffic. They closed 10 stores in Q1. In addition, a lot of these online wholesale retailers, think of Farfetch, Matches Fashion, which sold a lot of Gucci. We also saw the downfall of a lot of online retailers in 2024. Gucci has faced a lot of headwinds from different directions, and we're still seeing them thus far in 2025. Now, when it came to handbags, they did cite the successful reception of the Gucci Softbit line. We'll talk about some of their recent releases we saw drop this last quarter. So I'm going to reference this Purse Blog article referencing some of these new handbags, but they talk about the Softbit, which takes the oversized horsebit hardware motif, which we've been seeing on these recent runways, and it's placed as a closure on these more slouchy, relaxed hobo bags. These hobo bags have been in style for quite some time, and this is the Gucci spin on the silhouette. We also saw these bags towards the end of Sabato's era, as well as the recent runway, and more of that like fuzzy mohair version for fall/winter 2025, but going back to spring/summer 2025, this was one of their major drops. I'm so curious, what do you guys think about this bag? The thing that I always think about with shoulder bags is they're definitely something you need to try on in person, but it does definitely make me think of like late 2000s Gucci with like these hobo styles, especially with that like half horse bit. But we also have this half horse bit style in the form of this bucket bag, which we saw in the spring/summer 2025 runway. Personally, I'm not a huge bucket gal, but I will say I do like the zebra print. The zebra print was also seen on the Jackie as well. Another under the radar style, which I think is pretty okay price relative to Gucci's current pricing, is the Gucci 73 clutch. It's more east-west in proportion. It has a top handle as well as it comes with this very thin chain strap, very reminiscent of, if we think about like the Hermes Kelly cut, the Bottega Andiamo clutch, or the Savette Symmetry east-west clutches. It's not the worst price bag. It's $16.90. It's very on trend. Overall, I will say a lot of the pricing of Gucci with a lot of these recent releases are quite high, but I actually do quite like the Gucci half horse bit motif. I think it makes a statement, but it also feels coated at the same time. Whereas if we think about like the Marmont or even like the Blondie lines, very defined Gucci logos. This is a little bit more coated, but I think in the bigger sizes you can have a statement. Now, Francesca Bellettini, the deputy CEO of Kering, also mentioned how the emblem line is working quite well for the brand. This is to offset the Ophidia line. The emblem line uses that Gucci GG, the monogram print, the way the Ophidia line did, but this is a whole new range. It comes in that like heritage gray-brown color, but what's nice about about it is it comes in these like pinks, blues, mints, denim, cream, embossed black leather. The pricing is a little bit more approachable, but still overall more expensive than the Ophidia line, which was the line that used that kind of gray-brown monogram. It was often in combination with the Marmont logo. A lot of the styles also used the Gucci web straps, so think of that like red and green or sometimes blue and green. Sometimes you'd see the Ophidia line come in that blue GG canvas as well, but Emblem line is replacing this Ophidia line as more of like a lower price point than some of the other bags like the Bamboo or the Jackie, which are more of their like premium bags. But another interesting thing that they mentioned during the earnings call was how they're going to relaunch the Marmont bag, but it's going to be better quality, made with more premium materials. So that is going to be arriving in a month. So I'm very curious about that actually. I feel like whenever I talk about the Marmont, people say this bag is like over, this line is dead. Another recent release that we saw this past quarter was the Gucci Bamboo Diva line. This is more of that east-west interpretation of this very classic bag in really fun colors. We've got, of course, that Ancora red, olive green, also this kind of like neon, like brat green color, lilac, black, and white. Also love these new resin handles. I think that's a nice touch. I'm surprised this style isn't more popular. Maybe it's just there isn't enough like hype or marketing around it. I think this style and some of these recent bags, I felt like this was finally like Sabato hitting a stride here with some of these designs, but you know, of course he recently left, but that leads me to the next point here. And another major event of Q1 was Sabato de Sarno leaving just a couple weeks before the fall winter 2025 collection, and then Demna was appointed to Gucci as the new artistic director. This was quite shocking to many. I did a whole video on this, but during the earnings call they stated that Demna would be starting at the brand in July after his last show for Balenciaga, which is the couture show. And Francesca Bellatini said that he has already met with the team. They plan on also adding new members. They also stated during the call they received so many applications after Demna's announcement. I can only imagine there will be a new team in place, also a new seniority at the brand. But she said with his era, it is not going to be, quote, a cancellation of what the brand has been doing for the past 18 months with the Sabato era, which the focus of that period was to establish these core lines. When we think about the Jackie, the Blondie, the Bamboo, the Soft Fit, and the Emblem lines, Gucci now has this, which is going to be replacing the old version of the Marmont. I'm not really seeing a huge focus on the Dionysus. The Emblem is going to be replacing the Ophidia. So what Francesca Bellatini said was Demna is going to be building upon what has already been established here. But he's also tasked to bring on more novelty. So she stated how Gucci is going to blend their heritage with their fashion authorities. Of course, with this announcement, many were concerned, many were skeptical about this move. Shares went down after this announcement. I also think there's a concern within the luxury community about this appointment. On one side, I think, yes, Demna is a leading designer. He always gets people to talk about fashion, and I think that's what Gucci needs. Like, they need to be a brand that people talk about, because I don't think anybody has been talking about Gucci, unless you're like me talking about handbags, but like broadly speaking, it's not what people are talking about right now. And of course, he did things like the Hacker Project. He knows bags and accessories. He was a convenient internal hire, so there was no non-compete. Kering is very familiar with him, and he did wonders at Balenciaga. Of course, it may not be everybody's style. It's personally not my style, but I think people wonder, can he do that at a much, much larger scale and speak to, I think, the mass appeal that a brand like Gucci once had. Also, of course, there's the controversy. I don't need to harp on it with that campaign, but it was very problematic to say the least. After that, many people no longer wanted to buy Balenciaga. Still to this day, people don't want to support him at Gucci. The topic of tariffs did come up. Now, they said that for the American customer, of course, this was during Q1. They stated they hadn't felt the impacts of that because this was more of a move that was made in April. But of course, this has been something that has been anticipated for some time. But during this 90-day period, Kering did mention that they are willing to wait to see what happens and whether or not they are going to hike up prices. They were also questioned if the decline of the US dollar would impact prices, and they're waiting to see what happens. Of course, Hermes has straight up said they're going to be May 1st going to up their prices, but also Louis Vuitton increasing prices. Another thing that they did mention was was that Kering is expected to see a double-digit decline for Q2. And I think it's because at Gucci, there isn't really anything that is exciting people at the moment. I think in part of it is the state of Gucci right now. It's just not the brand that people are talking about. What they did state, however, is they do expect the second half of 2025 to be better than the first half of 2025. Of course, that's when we'll see Demna's collection, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. That's my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!